What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Survival Guide, and we're returning to her 2023 album, Deathdreams. Shout out to Emily herself, as well as to Kim and Michaela, even Mr. Solo and Mark, who've commented on a couple of the reactions so far. And the next track is Fight Me, which sounds confrontational. It sounds like a challenge, or at least a threat. Of course, given the lyrics I've heard from her so far, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more to it than that, or if it's more nuanced, but on the page it reads as a confrontation. Now, fair to say, you could ask someone to fight you if you had some pre-established set of ideas or values, and you told them that if I ever vary from that, if I ever stray from that path, fight me, bring it to my attention, confront me with that. So I could conceive of scenarios in which the phrase is not quite as combative as it sounds, but on the surface and without any other context, it reads like a challenge. So I'll see what I can pick up on a first listen. This is Survival Guide. The track is Fight Me, and it's from her 2023 album, Deathdreams.
I'm not here to judge or challenge anyone. In fact, I'm leaving out the back door. I can't just choose a card. I don't play well with others. Please don't give me the score. We've got no spirit. We don't wanna hear it. You may think I'm out of line. We've got no spirit. Can't you hear it in my voice? And see it in my glassy eyes. First it's head to head, then eye for an eye. And they're saying that it's healthy. It seems very human, so I'm just assuming there's something wrong with my circuitry. We've got no spirit. We don't wanna hear it. You may think I'm out of line. We've got no spirit. Can't you hear it in my voice? And see it in my glassy eyes. Please don't come on. Won't we let you down? Looking across the way. To some I'm just a boy, a heart with a hole, and my temperature is icy. I get it on the surface, but what's the real purpose? Seeing red's never fun for me. We've got no spirit. Can't you hear it in my voice? And see it in my glassy eyes. We've got no spirit. We don't wanna hear it. You may think I'm out of line. We've got no spirit. Can't you hear it in my voice? And see it in my glassy eyes.
Wow. I love it. That's one of my favorites on the album so far. I'll try to start lyrically so I can keep as many of the lines or line fragments that I did catch in the front of my mind. So, okay, it starts and it sounds like it's almost the opposite of what you might be inclined to think given the title. She's saying, I don't want to challenge anyone. In fact, I'm going out the back door. I'm not here to be confrontational or to insist upon my way of seeing, thinking, or acting as the primary or most desirable set of behaviors. And then, the chorus, this idea of like, almost not being alive and, seeing it in her glassy eyes and having no spirit, it sounds like there's a hollowed out view or attitude or feeling that she has relative to others. But it also sounds like she's saying she's aware that maybe that's just her, because seemingly assuming that it's human nature to feel things or to want to be, strident and even combative or confrontational with what you think is right, what you think is right to do. She's saying maybe it's just my messed up circuitry. I forget exactly what the line was, but she seems to be aware that she might be different from many others because of just the sort of idiosyncratic or eccentric character of her brain, or of who she is philosophically or in terms of identity. But then saying that like we have no spirit, and you can feel the tension in her voice, and there was something about a void. I wonder if she's maybe suggesting that like she's sort of aware of this discrepancy between seeing and doing things differently relative to others, and not wanting to be so confrontational, whereas others are just thinking, well, this is human nature, and there's no way that you could be outside of that. So I'm not quite sure about that, but the idea that she doesn't play well with others and she doesn't want to know the score or be given a color, sort of making reference to sports, how you have to choose a side, you have to pick a side about different issues. It sounds like she's saying that she's sort of beyond that. Like she doesn't, that's not how she sees things, and she doesn't want to have to like, oh, well, I'm definitively saying this or that. She's saying, look, I'm not here to impose my will. I don't want to, sort of challenge anybody. I'm just here to get by and to, feel and be as I can, even if that's different from other people. So yeah, I don't quite know how that all stitches together, but it does sound like she's in the process of characterizing herself internally, but also vis-a-vis others, and maybe in connection or collective with a subset of others. I'm not sure. Sonically, I love this. Okay, so right away I got a sense that it was maybe a bit more synth-poppy. I mean, the whole album's had a bit of that synth-pop meets art pop with a bit of a punk ethos or atmosphere, but this one felt almost a bit throwback synth-pop, and when it really got going and that bass line came in, my immediate thought is like, oh, this sounds like something Soft Cell might have done a few decades ago. It has sort of dark and grinding lower end and synth bass. Then it gets to the first iteration of the chorus, and I was thinking, this sounds like something maybe Tears for Fears might have done in the mid to late 80s. And then that post-chorus, like really energetic section, which sort of had like two phases, including, sort of still a deep and grinding synth bass, but a much higher, lighter, and more exuberant synth lead. That reminded me a bit of Aha, almost like a Take on Me, but with a sort of more modern production. So over the course of the track, I thought of a few different classic synth pop groups that I've either known for a while but become more of a big fan of recently, or known a fair amount before, but again in recent times gone through in a more methodical way in the deep dives that I'm doing, because I am deep diving on all three of those bands, and all three of those bands, despite being known maybe most for their hits from the 80s, continue into the modern times. So that was a nice like throwback atmosphere and retro vibe that I took away from some of the Sonics. Now, having said that, the sort of double time rhythm, especially when there was the clap in there, reminded me almost like of a gabber tune, like in a breakdown in a hardcore track, when you're waiting for the kick drum and the bass line to come back, and there's just that clap keeping the time. So it reminded me a bit of a hardcore tune in that specific respect. I love her echoed atmospheric vocals, the effect on her vocals, which does seem to be maybe the main vocal flavor of the album overall, so more good in that regard. And yeah, just a top tune that I perhaps enjoyed as much as any other one. Again, the first track really set my brain on fire. I was like, holy smokes, like I was excited for this because I know she used to be the singer for Tsunami Bomb and so on, but I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But now getting a sense for what this album has been sonically, vocally, and so on, this one really hit me in a surprising way, despite, already liking pretty much everything that's come before it. So, yeah, top tune. Let me know if you agree. I will see you next time. Peace.